Hey, what's going on, good people? It's your boy James Harris, of course, Mental Heal. Listen, I appreciate all the support over the years, whether it was for my book, man, Just Express Yourself, which is an interactive planning guide for boys and men to better express themselves. So salute to those parents who got it for their young sons. Praises to those partners and couples who got it for the men in their life. Of course, to the schools, the administrative, and everybody else who ordering the book by the dozens. I definitely appreciate that. And also salute to everybody who supported me on Cheesy Date Board Games, which is a good game for adults and couples, your game night, your date night. So many interactive ideas come from it. I definitely love the responses that it's garnering. But now I'm asking for your support again on this YouTube journey. I'm back. I took a little break because I had so much going on, but be a little bit more consistent with it. I got a couple interviews lined up with prominent people and people doing phenomenal things within the community or within this mental health space or even different authors and things like that. So bear with me. Appreciate your support. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And the guest that I got coming up now is.
Yeah, my name is George Monroe Jr. I'm a public historian as well as cultural preservationist. And I've been doing that now for the last 25 years. And I'm also an author of a recently published book, American Like Me, on reckoning, responsibility, and belonging.
Yeah, man. That's a good piece of literature you got there. So just curious, America Like Me, what's that entail?
So a lot of times, or at least I would say, at least currently, when you think about some of the decision making that's been taking place with the current administration, a lot of the laws, a lot of the culture um, is often kind of positioned from the standpoint of you have a select group of people that says who can be an American and who can't. But when you look at the plight of a lot of us as African Americans, well, a lot of us have, you know, ancestors that built this country. Some of us share ancestral ties with Europeans, indigenous even. And so when you think about the question of American like me, it's a rhetorical question because a lot of us can claim that title just as well as anyone else. Okay. And so that book was really kind of a beckoning call for myself, being a descendant of a founding father, um, and one who also has indigenous ancestry, in addition to ancestry where my enslaved ancestors actually built this country and built a number of universities here locally in Central Virginia. So when I think about the direction of this country, it's a period of reckoning that's actually starting to take place, not only internally for us as African Americans, but for society in general, in terms of what does it mean to truly be an American and who can actually, set the course as to what that really means for the future.
I got you. So in a nutshell, though, why do you think it's important that people, I guess, know their history? Because of course you're gonna have people saying, "Hey, that was the past. Let's move forward. Let's try to figure out what can we do now to esteem ourselves or affirm ourselves in today's society, opposed to looking back."
Well, it's you can't afford to even start to talk about what's forward if you don't know what took place prior to you, right? So in my particular situation, I wanted to know what made me tick. Because a lot of things that we as men, in general, even African American men, there's certain traumas that exist within our community. And through kind of self-reflection and diving into my own personal history, I found that a lot of things that we deal with actually have its root in slavery. And when we start to uncover, peel back the layers, then that's the only true way that healing can actually take place. And so the journey that I went on over the last, I would say, 30 to 40 years in trying to uncover that question of what makes me tick. I had to learn some pretty difficult truths about my family. And then once I was able to kind of get a handle of what those truths are, I determined what that impact was on me in terms of inheriting certain behaviors, certain structures, even and how that actually played a role in how I was navigating through today's society. And so to get to the answer to your question is if we don't take a thoughtful look at, things that have impacted us, whether it be family, whether it be society, whether it be, collective kind of community, it's going to be difficult for us to even say what makes sense going forward. And so it's my hope that the book will, give individuals an opportunity to kind of do that kind of self-reflection and then think about, okay, so how have these different systems that I've inherited caused me to kind of interact with society as we see it today? And what we will continue to see is what I refer to as a rupture, right? Where, we're going to start to break free of different chains that have been attached to us because of these things that we've inherited. And then that will allow us to have a clear perspective in terms of how do we move forward.
I got you. Appreciate that synopsis, man. And for those people who don't know, if one has inherited trauma or trauma's passed down throughout the genes and different things like that, that's a study called epigenetics. So if you research epigenetics, you'll find out that yes, you can inherit trauma and much more. But I think the baseline would be for one to review what epigenetics is. So appreciate you shedding light on that. So you mentioned, 30 plus years of doing this research on self and the book. What all went into it? Like, did you interview different people? Like, what was the, I guess, chronological order of how'd you come to this piece of literature?
Really kind of started with being raised in an intergenerational household. So for a portion of my life, I was actually raised by my great grandmother and a great uncle down on the family farm in Central Virginia. And I call these conversations underneath the windowsill, where when you're a child and you hear certain things and you want to try to make sense of them, but what we call the old folks would say, a child should stay at a child's place. That includes a child's curiosity. Well, it was something that I never let go of in terms of the different family dynamics that we had. And so, from a I guess from a self-reflection standpoint, my book is really not a memoir per se, but I do use snippets of my life to kind of true back to some of the essential themes that I talk about in the book in terms of, reckoning, in terms of, responsibility and belonging as relates to navigating as a man in 2026 and 25. And so where things really kind of came to a head for me is when I was doing my graduate program at the University of Richmond, looking at history and 19th century racial ideology. I just happened to take an elective, which was part of the program related to like psychology. And they had us do something called a genogram. And pretty much using the genogram, I was able to really start to think through what my family tree was or is. And then the other part of the genogram asks you to do is think about what were some of the different trends, what were some of the different themes that were associated within that tree, right? So themes like addiction, abuse, even things that focus on like patterns in relationships, like divorce, things of that nature. So when I was doing that genogram exercise, I noticed that there were these different themes that kept popping up. And I was like, oh, wow, this is something that's happening in my life where, having experienced abuse, I was also someone that might consider, what I'm saying, angry in this world. Um, my family had been, uh, part and parcel to different instances of divorces across the generations. And then I realized, hey, you know what? I'm also very much divorced at a young age. You know, single familyhood. I was a single father raising a little girl, as a result of a failed marriage. And so I started seeing all these different themes. I started seeing themes around alcoholism, things like that, and drug abuse and drug usage. And so it was like that's what kind of propelled me to start to think about, okay, so how do I now get to the root of the matter? And so that involved talking to the family members, doing things like oral family histories, and getting the family to talk to me about their experiences and about what they knew about certain loved ones. And then I started to take a look at, okay, so how does that now translate into broader society, right? So is my story indicative of certain studies, certain trends, certain things that have been acknowledged as, you know, um, I would guess systems or social constructs that we as African Americans face. And then if I can get free, if I can break free of some of the things that was holding me back, how do I now use this as an example to help others? Okay. How do I use this as an opportunity to influence institutions, right? Because, being a historian, being a cultural preservationist, I work with a lot of museums. I work with a lot of historical sites who are now starting to uncover the story of slavery. And you start to see that these different mind things that took place in the control of the enslaved, you still see them repeatedly in 2026 if you know what you're starting to look for. And so being able to kind of put this all together in a book to show folks, hey, this is what you can start to identify within your own family. Oh, and guess what? A lot of this stuff is structured. A lot of this stuff is by design. So if you know what you're looking at, here's a deep way to do the work to prevent this from impacting generations that take place after you.
Okay, so being you said that whether it's by structure or design, so I guess from a systemic standpoint, do you think this current America and how things are flowing, uh, do you think is like you?
I see it very much like me. And you didn't ask me the age question, but I'm 51 years old. Okay. I look at myself as a generation of transition, right? But I can remember a lot of the traditional ways, because I was raised by my great grandmother who was 99 when she passed. She was married to the son of an enslaved person. Okay. So when you think about things like, we as historians, we use terms like primary and secondary source information. Well, if you have someone within their lifetime who actually met a formerly enslaved person, had conversation with them, shared relationship. Well, guess what? Now you kind of know what it is in terms of what they dealt with back then. And being that it's now 2026 and I'm now in the middle part of my life, I still recall those conversations with my great grandmother. And so she was able to point to certain things that would take place in their lifetime that I'm seeing a repercussion of now some 50, 50 plus years later, right? From the time I've been on this earth. So I see America as we're in a crossroads, right? We're seeing things slowly but surely come to light that we've always known as African Americans has taken place. And so now that quote unquote these things have been exposed, what do we do now? How do we react now? How do we build now? And that's what we talk about in terms of just really becoming truly self-aware and breaking free of the systems that have bound us up and look to, in my opinion, you know, self-sufficiency in terms of, how do we develop the right relationships? How do we develop the right family structures? How do we develop community, which is the most important thing? And how do we do it from the standpoint of love, meaning, you know, um, yeah, these events happen and they've taken place, but I don't believe that it's through anger that we achieve any sort of movement. I think it's through love that we achieve movement. I think it's through becoming whole again is how we achieve these movements, and then sharing that up and out, and how we, basically kind of move forward from this point on.
Okay, I got you. In a nutshell, man, why should people purchase this book?
It's one of those things where it's like I've mentioned. I think that we all kind of share these type of traumatic experience. Some things folks are willing to talk about, some things they're not willing to talk about. Um, what I hope for folks to get from this particular book is not just to purchase it for entertainment, but to purchase it for know-how, right? To purchase it from the standpoint of, I want to know, I want to give you some tools that way you can learn a little bit more about yourself. Because I use myself as a case study, having come from a farm, having gone through, the public school system, gone into the military, and then after the military, went into corporate America, and I experienced some things there. And then I also experienced, certain types of, I guess, constructs, that I've had to navigate through just to get to a point where, you know what, at 51, I can now say that I'm whole, and that I feel like I've achieved a certain level of healing from generational trauma. Um, the book also exposes that a lot of things that we inherit are not our fault. There's just systems that we're born into. But at the end of the day, that does not absolve your responsibility of staying there, right? It gives you permission to move forward to correct those things, so that way you don't have to be impacted any further, number one. And then secondly, if you have children, if you have generations that's after you that look up to you, it gives you a blueprint in some ways to basically kind of define what your identity, your new identity should be. And that's about walking in wholeness. That's about walking from the standpoint of, you know what, I'm empowered by the fact that, despite our family flaws and things like that, we stand on shoulders of giants who had to go through systems of oppression to get us to where we are today. So now, how do we now? What is our responsibility as we move forward in terms of belonging? And that's pretty much at the heart of it all. So, all of these proceeds from the book support my nonprofit, the Cultural Roots Society, and we use that to facilitate programs that are linked to uncovering history at black sites of labor, or what I refer to as commemorative black landscapes. We also focus on working with HBCUs to identify the next generation of scholars, right? So if you have HBCUs that have academic programs rooted in history, any of the social sciences, museum science, archaeology, we want to know who those students are, because we have a network with the cultural roots where we can set them up with internships and work with the different colleges and universities to actually record the history and progress and things that they're working on, so that way we can begin to preserve our history, so that way we're not in the process of having things whitewashed or erased altogether, like what we're seeing today. So if we take the responsibility to document our own histories while we're going through a certain level of self-healing in the process, then we'll be in charge of those stories, and we'll make sure that those things are preserved for generations to come.
My man, what would you say to somebody out there who does read your book and or just identify within themselves that they need to do some generational healing just because of some things that they may have inherited or some things they seen within our family growing up? What would you say they should do to, I guess, try to heal or navigate where they are now? Because I see people all the time, within my sessions of not being able to address some stuff or just putting it off. And then, of course, those things manifest itself in different relationships, whether work or personal. So what would you say to that person out there?
I would say, and I would say see it through. You and I are frats, so we know how important that concept is in terms of perseverance. Like making sure that when you uncover these things, be courageous enough to push through and deal with your mess. Okay, because the act of dealing with your mess frees up the next generation, and on top of that, it frees you up for whatever remainder of your life that you have. And so we have a responsibility to ourselves to get whole. And, it's one of those things where if we don't take the initiative to do that, how can we expect anyone else to do it? Like this is the grunt work, right? Where you uncover stuff, and then, don't be afraid to face it and be like, yeah, I need to refine what this thing is that's about me, that's I know in my heart of hearts is not the right way. And one of the things that's helped me out quite extensively was my faith, and coming to terms with these different things, realizing that, you know what, with certain things that were out of my control, and in other things I made decisions with the information that I had at the time. So letting myself off the hook, and then saying, I can always, as long as I have breath in my body, I can always, you know, continue to do better, continue to strive to be better. And then in the process, I can see my whole world change around me and not be bound by any sort of, you know, chains. I think is a better, and figuratively, like, breaking those chains and being able to move forward, in the way that I actually see my life, kind of like unfolding. So I would encourage anyone that if you run into, that type of internal conflict as you read the book, it's okay. That's what it's meant to do. It's meant to force you to think. It's meant to make you, perform some level of evaluation of yourself, and then say, okay, now what do I do? But it also is going to paint a picture of you of how how society also controls that, right? So when you actually become into the fullness of who you are, society is going to have something to say about that, about a person that's free and not dictated by money, or not bound by social status or titles and things like that. When you become free, society will confront you with that. And that's okay too. But at the end of the day, this is about building self awareness. It's about building a positive identity. So that way we can move freely, not bound by social constructs.
Man, listen, solid piece of literature, good advice, good helpful tools that you have to assist those generations now and those generations to come. So I appreciate that. Any last minute tips on that you want to leave with the people?
Absolutely. Make sure that if you have older family members, get those stories. Get your family stories. Understand where you came from and try to go back as far as possible. You know, um, take advantage of the family reunions, take advantage of the homecomings at the churches, and make sure that if you're going down to the country or whatever have you, make sure that you spend time with your loved ones and your family members that have the stories, because we're in a process, or in fact, we are in a situation in America where our history is purposely being erased. It's purposely being whitewashed. It's purposely being misrepresented. In other words, our humanity is under attack once again. And if that does something to you in terms of jerks your spine, then you have a responsibility to go out and document your family history, because we are the living archive. You can't erase what we already know about. Okay. And there are organizations popping up everywhere, that are descendant led, that are focused on the preservation of African American history, and it's important that we support those organizations, right? And what I would say is, get your pen and paper out, get your smartphone out, and start filming your older folks, and get your family stories down so that way those things are not lost. And also start working on developing your family tree, because family trees are beneficial in terms of helping to diagnose potential illnesses, understanding different themes that we talked about earlier that might be impacting you. You don't know where they get their start. Understanding the root cause of a situation can help you with healing, so that way it doesn't continue on. So that way you mitigate it. So those will be the most important things, whether you purchase or donate to the organization or not. Make sure you get something in your hand that you can actually start to document your history, and you can always go to culturalsociety.org to, learn how you can do that. You can hit me up directly at George at theculturalsociety.org. And I'm happy to respond to any email or questions that you might have on how to start this journey, because not only is it important for the generations coming after us, it's important for us now to try to get a handle of that thing, so that way we can move forward.
Yeah, yeah. All right, cool, man. So to wrap up, I definitely was going to ask you all that contact information for people who want to donate and or just have questions or want to book you to come speak to that history class or their organization and all that. So one more time with your information.
Absolutely. So the organization is the Cultural Roots Society. You can get there at culturalrootsociety.org. And then, of course, my contact information within that is George at theculturalrootsociety.org. And so, I'm available for, anything related to history, cultural preservation, public history, um, genealogy, as well as any sort of like, family tree sort of discussion and development. So I'm happy to help with research and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, I just want to encourage folks to really consider capturing their own personal histories because that's going to become important in the long run.
George, my man, appreciate you for coming, sharing that light on the information, man. People are definitely encouraged to go and get that book, and I'll catch you on the next one, brother.
Sounds good. Appreciate you, James.